Hi and welcome to MSc. In this video we're going to be looking at naming ionic compounds, specifically ones without transition metals. There'll be another video that you should check out that has naming ionic compounds with transition metals. So in order to get started on naming ionic compounds, we need to recall the fact that when we name a cation, the process is a little different than when we name an anion. Remember too that the cations are the positive ions, whereas the anions are the negative ions. So potassium will form a positive ion. It is the cation. And from the periodic table, we know that potassium is in the first group, so we know that it will form the potassium plus ion. And so the name for this, because it's the cation, is just simply the potassium ion. So nothing special about the name there, pretty much as easy as it can get. On the other hand, the anion is the negative one. This is the fluorine, and we also know from the periodic table that fluorine is a halogen, and it's one electron away from stability, so it's going to gain one, which will make it a negative charge, and it will be F negative. And the name of this, because it's an anion, is going to be fluoride ion. So remember that we take the stem of the name and we add the IDE ending. So let's jump through here and look at ionic compounds. Now we know ionic compounds are going to consist of a metal and a non-metal. And specifically, this metal will transfer electrons to the non-metal, which will result in the metal being a cation, positive, and the non-metal, the anion, negative. Now, naming ionic compounds is done by stating the metal name, followed by the name of the non-metal ion. So we have to remember that IDE ending. So when we do some examples here, we look at this and we see potassium, fluorine, just like we saw before. So when we put this together, it is going to be potassium, which is just the name of the metal, and then fluoride, not fluorine. So it's just the metal name followed by the name of the anion. Moving on to this last example here, we see that we have Al2O3, and we notice here we have subscripts, and of course this tells us that we have 2 aluminum and 3 oxygen atoms in a particle of this compound, whereas here we had subscripts of 1 that we don't write. So what's important to know is that these subscripts do not affect the naming of the ionic compound unless the metal is a transition metal. Right? So these subscripts will not affect, and we know that aluminum is not a transition metal because if we look back at the periodic table, we know that the transition metals are the metals in this region of the periodic table, in this sunken region here. And we know that aluminum is not in that section. So aluminum will always form the +3 ion because aluminum wants to lose its 3 valence electrons. So when we go to name this, this will simply be aluminum, and then it's not oxygen, it's oxide. Again, with the naming being with that IDE ending. I hope this quick run through of naming non-transition metal ionic compounds has been helpful. If it has, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the station. And as always, thank you very much for listening and watching.